So thank you so much for joining us as we continue our study on the book of 2 Peter. We're in chapter 2, and this is the main part of the book of 2 Peter. The whole point is talking about false prophets, false teachers. Remember 1 Peter was encouraging these churches in modern-day Turkey how to withstand persecution, pressure from the outside. And 2 Peter is to the same group of churches, and it's really dealing with, how to deal with pressure from the inside. And how many of you know sometimes there's pressure from the inside? We've got a lot of churches, we've got a lot of buildings with church on the outside, but there's no church on the inside. There could be heresy on the inside. So we're going to talk about 7 verses tonight. 2 Peter 2, verse 4 through 11. This is really an intriguing passage right here. It says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains," and in parentheses is pits, we're going to talk about that, "of darkness, to be held for judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what was going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, a righteous man." How many of you have ever thought of Lot as righteous? It's very interesting because when you go back to Genesis, him and Abraham, they split ways, and he went over and he went to Sodom and Gomorrah. But the Bible calls him righteous. That's very, very interesting. And so, in other words, he lived there, but he himself did not live like them. A lot of times we think, well, he chose that. He chose it because it was well watered. Anyway, "who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to hold the unrighteous for punishment on the day of judgment. This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desire of the flesh and despise authority. Bold and arrogant, they are not afraid to heap abuse on celestial beings, yet even angels, although they are stronger and more powerful, do not heap abuse on such beings when bringing judgment on them from the Lord." So a very interesting passage. And so really, I've titled this passage, "The Fate of the Wicked and the Rescue of the Righteous." There's 3 categories here where Peter says 3 examples of the ungodly, the unrighteous being condemned. And then there's also examples of God rescuing the righteous. Righteous means right standing with God, rescuing them out of unrighteous situations. And so this is really good news because as our world, would you agree that our world is toxic? And what it says, we can be like Lot. We can live in depravity, among immorality, but not be tainted by it. And God is able to rescue us out of any situation. So we're going to look at these 3 examples tonight. First of all, the sin of the angels. So Peter says that God condemned these sinning angels to the lowest depths of hell. And the word used here is Tartarus. And basically, Tartarus was not a Hebrew conception, but Greek. The New Testament was written in Greek. In Greek mythology, Tartarus was the lowest hell. It was as far beneath hell as heaven was high above the earth. And in particular, it was the place in Greek mythology. And you say, why are you talking about Greek mythology? Because you have to understand that to understand this Greek word, Tartarus. And it was the place which the Titans who had rebelled against Zeus, of course, the father of gods and men, it was the place that they said they were thrown into the lowest hell, Tartarus. So the second word here that we're looking at speaks of the pit of darkness, or the chain of darkness. And here there's some doubt. There's actually 2 Greek words that are used. And before I go into this, let me say this. So let me see how I can say this in a good way. Okay, So when the Bible is perfect in its original text and manuscripts, okay? And it's still very, very accurate today. But what happened is, back in those days they didn't have printing press, so the word was written down through the authors of the Bible. And I'm saying this not to scare you. I don't want you to be scared because people say all the time, oh, the Bible has inaccuracies, or the Bible. That's not true, okay? But what happened is these scribes, lawyers, would write all, and they were as perfect as humans can be, and they would check every word and do everything. And so, but some of the manuscripts, like this place right here, he threw them in a dark pit, or he chained them in darkness. In our Greek manuscripts of the Bible, there's actually two words that are used, and they're similar but different. So I'm going to talk about this. The first one is Syros, and originally it meant a great earthenware jar used for storing grain. Then it came to mean the great underground pits in which grain was stored and served as granaries. So in the olden days, today we have silos. And this word came to mean silo, the above ground storage. But in these days, they stored a lot of things underground because they didn't have electricity and would keep things cool. And so again, Syros has come in English to mean silo, which still describes towers in which grain is stored today. But still later, this same word, Syrios, was meant to mean a pit into which a wolf or other wild animals was trapped. That's what it came to mean. And so this word would mean that God condemned these angels, into a pit in the ground, into Tartarus, way down the depths of the earth, below hell. And so what happened is, again, a few manuscripts use a different word, and it's the word Sira, and it means a chain. And so the King James Version, even the NIV version, it uses that God condemned them and put them in chains of darkness. So now, having said that, I think the first word, Sierra, is actually the best one here and best one to use. But again, let's think about this. Let's think about the difference. The difference is, does it really matter if whichever one is correct? Does it really matter if God put them in chains of darkness or in a pit of darkness? I mean, it doesn't really matter. But I want you to know that. Very interesting. We have a school of ministry here that meets every Saturday. And one of the professors that's been speaking, his name is Dr. Fount Schultz. And he's actually, it's very interesting. So Brick and Cliff came in, and they told me the Bible college that they went to, and I'm like, oh, I know Dr. Fount Schultz, and he was their professor. Well, way back when I was a kid, do you know Fount? Do you know Fount? No. And so anyway, he worked with my dad. He was the president of my dad's Bible college at the church. And one of the smartest theologians I've ever met. I mean, when I was a kid, I never understood one sermon he talked about. Not one. Now I think he's a genius, right? He has his doctorate in linguistic studies. And here's what he did. Because see, sometimes, here's what I want to say. Sometimes, like in the Bible, there's several places where the numbers are different. It's like, one translation has this many baths, 12,000 baths. Another one has 100 baths. Well, what's the difference? Well, here's the difference. You have to understand that when the Bible was originally written, and what Dr. Fount says is that even in every language, the meaning of words changes over time. So it was correct, it is correct, but the meaning changed, okay? And for example, think about the English language, how much it has changed. Think about some of the language that the kids use today. Okay, like when I was growing up, when I was a teenager in my young 20s, like you would never say that something sucked. You would never tell somebody they suck. Because there were references to that, and you were going to throw down if you did that. Well, today it's like, oh, that sucks. Well, it means it stinks. Oh, that stinks. Oh, that's no good. Well, what's happened? The words have changed, and so what he did is he did this study because, and what he found that the modern translations aren't wrong in their confusion. The problem is that the language has changed over thousands of years. So anyway, just an incredible, so that's some of the things that our School of Ministry is getting. So the story of the fall of the angels is one which is rooted deeply in Hebrew thought, and it underwent much development as the years went on. So the original story is in Genesis 6:5. Now, there's two things, okay? We know in Revelation 12, it says that the dragon, the devil or Satan, that after his rebellion, he swept a third of the stars out of the heavens, which what most theologians have taken that to mean is that a third of the angels followed him in their sin, okay? But and those are what we would call demons and things today. But this is talking about Genesis 6:5. Let me read Genesis 6:1-5. You've probably, every year when you read your Bible, you probably think about this and you're like, okay, well, what in the world does that mean? I'm just going to move on. Is that what you do when you're reading? You got time to read, you just move on if you don't understand it? Don't do that. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans, and they had children by them. They were the heroes of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. So when it's talking about the sons of God went down, it's talking about angelic beings, celestial beings. And the angels in the Old Testament, they were called the sons of God. There were several references to that. One is in Psalms 80, I believe 89 and 9. But one of the famous ones is in Job. Let's read Job 1:16. It's 3 times in Job. It says, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, the angels. And Satan also came among them. And that's when the devil, Satan, Lucifer, he starts to tell, God, that, Job only follows you because you bless him and so on and so forth. So in other words, up in the heavenly realm, some angels went up there and they were with God, and the devil, Lucifer, went with them. So anyway, but they calls them the sons of God. And so 3 times in Job, once in Psalms, there's several other places. But sons of God, they're referring to angelic beings. So these angels came to earth and seduced mortal women, and the result is this lustful union, and a race of giants came. The giants were called the Nephilim, okay? And there are several books that aren't in our Bible. They didn't match the canonization process, but they're called apocryphal books. And like the Catholic Bible has 7 apocryphal books, and there's some good history. There's some good things in there. It just didn't meet the canonization process. So when the church fathers got together, they had a very, very strict criteria for something to be canonized in the Old Testament or the New Testament. And I said that because there's a historical book called the Book of Enoch, which goes back way before, I believe, is Noah's great-grandfather. And Enoch he goes into great detail about this. So the thought is this: the sons of God, these angels, they came down, they had human relationships with women on the earth, and it produced a superior race. It produces this line of giants called the Nephilim. And through the Nephilim, just a series of wickedness comes to the earth, which is very interesting. It's funny, sin produces consequences that you have to keep dealing with. Are you with me? Sometimes the consequences we're dealing with is not our sin. It was a sin of our parents. It was a sin of someone around us. When sin comes into the earth, it produces consequences. In Numbers 13:33, the children of Israel, they're trying to go in the promised land. They're at Kadesh Barnea, and it says this: this is the report they give to Moses. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim, and we seem like grasshopper in our own eyes, and so we look the same to them. So just very interesting. And so, again, this sinful situation here, it produced this race of giants, and they were not godly people. There's many different accounts of that. But you know what? You had to deal with them. So even Joshua and the Israelites going into the promised land, it was the Nephilim that were standing in the way, the race of these giants. And this is it. What I love about the Bible is something happens, and then if you really study, you find it woven through Scripture. And it's very interesting. In 1 Corinthians, Paul is admonishing the church in Corinth, and he's admonishing women in modesty. Okay? And listen to this. He says, "It is for this reason that women ought to have authority over their own head, cover their head, not let their hair flow down, because of the angels." And the thought goes back to, for some reason, these angelic beings were attracted to women with long flowing heads. So Paul says, hey, cover your head, cover your head. Just really interesting. Then let's go back to verse 11. It says, bold and arrogant, they were not afraid to heap abuse on celestial beings. Yet even angels, although they are stronger and more powerful, do not heap abuse on such things when bringing judgment on them from the Lord. And so this is really interesting. And what this is saying is that angelic beings. The thought is you're not supposed to curse, or you're not supposed to criticize angelic beings. Very interesting. And the thought is from Jude chapter 9. Of course, Jude 9. Jude only has one chapter. Jude verse 9. It says this, "But even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil about the body of Moses," so there was some dispute there, "did not himself dare to condemn him for slander, but said, 'The Lord rebuke you.'" I'm telling you, church, we have to be more careful with our mouth. We have to be more careful with what we say and just leave all criticism out of it. So the second one, so that's the fall of the angels, the sin of the angels. The second one is the destruction of the ungodly and the rescue of Noah. So the second illustration, the destruction of wickedness, which Peter chooses, may be said to lead on from the first. So sin was introduced into the world, or it was perpetuated by these angels going down, producing this godless race. And so, again, the angels led to that basically intolerable sin, which ended in the destruction of the world, because what we read, Genesis 6, 1 through 5, that is right before Noah and the flood. Right before God says, I'm done with this. Their thoughts, their hearts are just continually on evil. Let me read Genesis 6, 5 through 8. It says, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe out from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." So in the midst of this destruction, God did not forget those who clung to him, and Noah was saved together with 7 others, his wife, his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. And, Jewish tradition, Noah acquired a very special place, and not only was he regarded as the one man who had been saved, but also as the preacher who had done his best to turn men from their evil ways. Josephus, who was a historian, he wasn't a Christian, but he was a historian, he says this, "Many angels of God lay with women and begot sons who were violent and who despised all good on account of their violence on their own strength. But Noah, displeased and distressed at their behavior, tried to induce them to alter their dispositions and conduct for the better." That comes from Antiquities. So, again, attention in this passage is concentrated not so much on the people who were destroyed, but the 7 people who were saved. The 7 righteous that were saved out of this terrible situation. And Noah is offered as a type of man who, amidst the destruction of the wicked, receives the salvation of God. And he has 2 outstanding qualities. So again, the thought is this. I want to encourage you to start thinking differently. God is always looking to bless the righteous. 3 people were excited about that. I guess you're not righteous, you know? But God is always looking. He looks down and he's going to bless the righteous. It doesn't matter if you're in Babylon. It doesn't matter if you're over here. It doesn't matter where you're. It doesn't matter what people do around us. It doesn't matter how high the immorality is. God is looking for the righteous. He's going to bless the righteous. He's going to protect the righteous. And he's going to lift the righteous out of these situations. But in the midst, so let's look at 2 of Noah's character qualities. In the midst of a sinning generation, Noah remained faithful to God. You know, later Paul would urge the people not to conform to the world, but be transformed from it. Romans 12:2. It well may be said that often the most dangerous sin of all is conformity. To be the same as others is always easy. To be different is always difficult. But from the days of Noah until now, he or she who would be the servant of God must be prepared to be different from the world. And, you know, sometimes we feel pressure because we don't want to be different. But look at what's going on around us. I mean, look, I'm not trying to be mean or harsh, but look how messed up our culture and our society is. We can't even identify a male and a female. I mean, we have, you know, we just stay away from commitment. Oh, we'll just live together. I mean, the immorality that has invaded our country is just incredible. And listen, here at Family Life, listen, we have had all types. You wouldn't even believe the types of people that have come to Family Life that have found Jesus and gave their life to Him, and they're changed today. And I'm not condemning the world for not serving God. I mean, they're just doing what their hearts are leading them to do. But what I'm saying is the church, we should be proud to be different. We should be excited if we're different, because everyone can follow the crowd, and Noah was different. Can you imagine what it was like for Noah? Can you imagine be building an ark for 100 years and people think it's never rained? And you're living different from the world. You're not living in immorality. You're raising your kids different. And you're out here building an ark because it's going to flood. And I'm sure that he had I'm sure happy hour went outside that ark. Come on, grab your 6, come on, bring your ice chest. We're going to go watch this guy. He's building this massive boat. He's lost his mind. Can you imagine how his kids felt? Being ridiculed? But I tell you what, when the fountains of the deep opened up, when the door closed, when the rain came, I mean, it was too late. So in the midst of a sinning generation, Noah remained faithful to God. So here, I guess the thing is for us, it's not okay to excuse sinful behavior. It's not okay to excuse, well, everyone else is doing it. It's not okay. Noah stood out. He was different, and God called him righteous. But the second thing, Peter says that Noah was a preacher of righteousness. A preacher of righteousness. The word for preacher used is kurux, and it literally means a herald. What did a herald do? A herald were runners, basically. And they would take a message from one important person to another person, and they were a runner. And so basically, Noah was a preacher of righteousness. He was a herald. He was a runner. He was speaking the gospel. So the preacher is the man who brings to men an announcement from God. And here is something of very considerable significance. The good man is concerned not only about saving his own soul, but saving the souls of others. And I think this is a problem today, church, because I believe many times once we get saved, we get comfortable in our own skin, we get comfortable in church, we get comfortable with our Christian friends, and sometimes we're not that concerned about all the people around us that are going to hell. I mean, and so Noah, what it says is that Noah was concerned that his whole community was going to be washed away in a flood. He was concerned. And again, so he proclaimed the message. Now, here's the deal. Not one person responded. Response or fruit from us sharing the gospel is not our business. That's not our concern. Our job is to speak the truth in love. Our job is to be a representation of the Holy Spirit, of God. That's our job. And I'll tell you another thing. The best tool of the devil is he wants you to hide your fruit. He doesn't want you to see the fruit. Many, many years ago, no one in here was in the church that time. We bought this land. It was just vacant. And over here in the corner, I had a little office building, a little modular building. And had a sign out there that said, Future Home of Family Life. And I was out there probably 3.5 years before we built our first building over here. And when we built our first building, one day this couple came to church. And they said, they knew who I was somehow, I don't know. And they came to church, and they came up to me after service and said, hey, Pastor Terry, we just want to tell you, we were starting a business and we're having a tough time. And every day we would drive by there and your car was there. You'd be there at 5:30, 6 in the morning. And every day they would drive by and say, well, Pastor Terry's there. He's still working, doing his thing. We don't see any building taking place. So, and they sat there and told me how much I encouraged them when many days I was in that office, I felt like a failure. You never know who you're influencing. You never know how you're impacting people. And the devil wants to hide that. But when we live righteous, godly lives, and by living a righteous, godly life, I want to tell you this, that I don't think Noah was condemning people. I think he was trying to reach people. When we love people, there's no depth of how God can use the love that we give for people. So Noah was concerned about the other people as much as he was concerned about himself and his family. And then the third example is this, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the rescue of Lot. Really interesting. This terrible, now you can read this whole story in Genesis chapter 18 and 19. Is this whole long story leading up to Sodom and Gomorrah, the angels going to rescue Lot and his family out of Sodom and Gomorrah, fire and brimstone falling down on Sodom and Gomorrah. But this terrible and dramatic story, again, it begins with Abraham's plea for Sodom and Gomorrah. And these angels come and they're talking to Abraham about his stuff. And then they're leaving, they say, should we hide from Abraham what we're about to do? And basically God says, listen, we're going to see the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah have reached the heavens. And I'm going to see if what I've heard is real. And if it is, I'm going to destroy it. And so Abraham starts, it's really an intriguing chapter because he starts this negotiation with God. Far be it from you, if there's 50 that are righteous, will you destroy Sodom and Gomorrah for 50? No, we will not do that. They started, well, hold on. What if there's 5 less than 50? And he goes all the way down to, I believe it's 10, right? He goes all the way down to 10. Well, Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters, and they had boyfriends. That's 6 right there. Although I don't think the boyfriends were righteous. They didn't make it out, But anyway, so they have 4. That is the wickedness that they were living in. It wasn't like there was a church with 100 people or 50 people or 30 people. I mean, they couldn't find 10 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah. And that place got burned down. Genesis 19:29 says this. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abram, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. And so here again is the story of the destruction of sin and the rescue of righteousness. As in the case of Noah, we see that Lot has characteristics of a righteous man. Here's the first thing. And what we see here from 2 Peter, that Lot lived in the midst of evil, and the very sight of it was a constant distress to him. And it says the depravity. What does depravity means? Sexual immorality, fornication, adultery, idolatry. As bad as you can get. One theologian says this. He says, our great security against sin lies in being shocked at it. Here is something very significant. It often happens that when evil first emerges, people are shocked at it, but as time goes on, they cease to be shocked at the evil and accept them as a matter of course. So what I wonder is this: the shows that you watch at home, would you watch them if I came to your house? Well, I'm not going to invite you, Terry. Okay. But here's what I'm saying. Do you remember, you don't remember, but way back, about, the older generation remembers this. I've heard about it. I've seen clips of it. But the first time there was a curse word on TV, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that. And used to, like a romantic scene was kissing somebody. Look where we've come. Look, and can I tell you something? America is still years behind Europe. I got off in Austria for, I was flying out there and I had a day, so I stayed in Austria. I walk out and there's billboards with pornography on the billboards. Just blatant. And what happens? They're not like, my brother and I were like, oh man. They're just walking around like it's not a big deal. Like it's no big deal. Well, years ago when it first happened, it was shocking. It was shocking. And now it isn't. And so a problem comes when we're no longer shocked by evil. We're no more shocked by immorality. We're not shocked by godlessness. We're not shocked by evil. We're not shocked. So what happens over time is the shock wears off and things are accepted as a matter-of-fact style of the normal order of things. And for the good of the world and of our own souls, we must keep alive this sensitiveness which is shocked by sin. And I don't know, and it's just amazing that, if you start a new show or something, usually the first season starts out pretty good. Then the second season, everyone's sleeping together, and, what's really bad is, because we have Netflix and all these things, there's just nudity everywhere in that. It's just, but again, we're not shocked by it anymore. We're not shocked by it. The second characteristic is Lot lived in the midst of evil, and yet he escaped its taint. Really, really interesting. He escaped it. So amidst the sin of Sodom, he remained true to God. And if a man will remember it, he has all the grace of God as an antiseptic, which will preserve him from the infection of sin. So no man need to be the slave of the environment in which he happened to find himself. And if you go back and read that story, it's these angelic beings, they come to Lot's house. Then all the men of Sodom are beating on the door wanting to have sex with him. This is, it was just rampant. And Lot's trying to, he's trying to do all kind of things, but it's just incredible. You just see how it is. I guess in God's eyes, it was like the fullness of sin has reached a point. And so very interesting. The third thing is this: when when the worst comes to the worst, Lot was willing to make a clean break with his environment. Now, here's the thing. So when you read this story, it doesn't appear like Lot was prepared to go, because the angels kind of had to drag him out, right? But think about this. See, sometimes we'll stay in a bad place because we don't want to start over. Like, he was having to leave everything that he had built all these last years, and he was going to have to move to a whole new area and start life over. And so it wasn't that he wasn't willing to go, it was just that he didn't want to go. Now, Lot's wife was not willing to go. If you remember the story, the angel said, don't look back, and she looked back and turned into, a pillar of salt. And so anyway, think about this. So the thought here, I think the thought here is that when we find ourselves in a really, really bad situation, sometimes we need to make a clean break. We don't want to make a clean break. We want to figure out, how can we make it work and not have to leave my job? How can we make it work and not have to do this? How can we make it work and not uproot things? And so again, this is what was going on here. And would you bow your heads with me? And so really the whole thing tonight is really, it's about the unrighteous, the ungodly, and their consequences, but also how Noah, how Lot, how they were able to remain righteous in a polluted world. So the thought to us, church, is it is possible to remain pure in a toxic world, but it does take effort. Some worship, and if there's something that you need to give to God, if there's something you need to repent for, if there's a track of your life that you're like, man, I've got to get, I'm becoming tainted by the evil around me, and I need to be righteous. And I'm gonna open up the altars for prayer. If you want to come kneel up here at the altar and just pray before God, if you want to kneel where you're at, if you just want to stand and worship, let's take a few minutes just to do a heart reflection.